During the end of the Second World War, Allied powers gathered to initiate negotiations aiming to establish a stable basis for a liberal world economic order able to prevent another collapse of the world trade that could contribute to the onset of another conflict as it had happened before the World War II. These negotiations culminated in 1944 with the Bretton Woods Conference, which established two of the most controversial global economic governance institutions that we know today as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. The Bretton Woods system was based on three main pillars: currency stability, credit and financial institutions, and promotion of freer international trade and investment. Currency stability was regarded as a precondition for the stable expansion of international trade. Due to the dominance of the United States economy, the system established fixed rates based on the dollar as the underlying principle for monetary stability. This is what we know as adjustable peg system. The dollar was therefore accepted both as an international medium of exchange and a stable store of value. Bretton Woods also created credit and financial institutions as the IMF and the World Bank. The IMF was supposed to provide credits to help countries finance short-term balance of payments deficits. Meanwhile, long-term balance of payments deficits were to be resolved through US aid. Voting rights at the IMF were and remain determined by the relative size of member states' economies and its contributions to the fund. This is why its conditionality to US power has raised a lot of criticism. The World Bank, originally the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, was established in response to the Keynesian call for development assistance to weaker countries. However, the bank was starved of funds by controlling ministers, mainly of the US, and wasn't until the 60s when, under pressure of the UN and third world countries, the bank established a soft loan as part of the UN International Development Agency. As an extension of the Bretton Woods system, in 1948 the General Agreement of Tariffs and Trade was created to promote freer international trade and investment. Many countries resisted US intentions to achieve binding agreements towards free trade and imposition of penalties for non-conforming countries, but after long negotiations, the GATT established rules to encourage non-discrimination between countries and the progressive reduction of tariffs over time. Both the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank rightly have a notorious reputation as US-dominated. In fact, the Third World has been effectively excluded from both institutions. However, third world countries lobbied through the Economic and Social Council and through the UN Development Programme and achieved the following agreements: Special UN Fund for Economic Development, International Development Association, UN Special Funds, and UN Conference on Trade and Development. Furthermore, third world countries during the 60s and 70s created their own exclusive and autonomous organizations, as the Non-Aligned Movement, the Group of 77, and the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, the OPEC. These organizations had key objectives to promote. These proposals made by third world organizations made pressure to the United Nations General Assembly, which adopted the new International Economic Order Program in 1974. During that decade, the OPEC played an important role on the financing of third world borrowing. However, rising interest in the 80s and development program failures led to debt crisis. This debt crisis made 70 third world countries be subject to IMF structural adjustment loans. These structural adjustment programs were a set of neoliberal measures that the third world countries asking for economic aid to the IMF had to accomplish in order to receive loans. Although these measures did not solve the debt problem completely, some developing economies started to experience an intense economic growth that gave them the opportunity to change the balance of economic power. The most evident change has been the emergence of the G20 in the post-global financial crisis, displacing the G8. The IMF and the G20 have demonstrated support on counter-cyclical government spending suggested by the EU in its fiscal initiative to stabilize the Eurozone, with measures as the Robin Hood or Tobin tax, impose taxes on resource-based MNCs, and reject American demands for China to abandon exchange rate management in favor of market-driven yuan appreciation. We can say then that Bretton Woods system is being discredited, and its institutions have felt the pressure to reform themselves. The IMF has sought to redefine its role as a global economic regulator and finance provider, partly from a more Keynesian perspective. The reform agenda has addressed changes on governing structures and voting procedures, so that the voting rights can better reflect the changing balance of global economic power, special drowning rights use can be expanded, and global reserve currency can be developed as an alternative to the dollar. Such reform process can be understood as an attempt to articulate a greater independent presence as a global actor.